Dinner smelled like effort, not celebration, not warmth, just effort. The kind that fills a house with roasted rosemary chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and a store-bought pecan pie someone just didn't have time to make from scratch. Everyone talked over the soft instrumental music playing from the Bluetooth speaker in the corner. Jurvitson's mother called it healing tones, like a home goods candle had a soundtrack. I was in the kitchen, refilling the bread basket and setting out extra napkins, half listening to conversations I wasn't invited into. Nobody told me to stay in there, but nobody said I could leave either. Jurvitson sat on the edge of the couch like a TED Talk in human form. Calm, poised, palms flat, voice rehearsed. If you didn't know better, you'd think the event was about him. Maybe it was. The kids sat side by side on the floor, hunched over their tablets. No one made eye contact. No one asked about school. And not one of them noticed when I touched the chipped teacup on the counter and quietly set it aside. I chose the plain mug instead. Easier not to answer questions I never get asked. People say family is where you're safe, but sometimes it's just where you're trapped quietly. Jurvitson raised his glass and tapped his wedding band against it like a mic check. "I want to thank everyone," he said, smiling like this was his party. "Therapy's been humbling, but I'm growing, slowly." Soft claps. Lenora, my mother, even managed a quiet nod, eyes fixed on the tablecloth, her approval as muted as always. "I'll need space to heal," he continued, "but the kids still need structure. And Rhea," he turned to me with a smile so tight it could have been stapled on. "She's the structure." I blinked. That was it. "You'll take care of the kids while I take care of myself," he said, like he was telling me the weather. No emotion, no invitation to respond. Someone laughed. "Rhea's got this." "As she's the planner." They meant it as a compliment. It felt like a rope tightening around my throat. I looked around the room. Everyone nodding, smiling, passing plates. No one asked if I agreed. Dinner was served 15 minutes later. 9 people, 8 chairs. Funny how that always works out. I stepped back instinctively. It's something you do when you've lived your life dodging disappointment. You don't announce it, you just make room. Jurvitson didn't notice. Of course he didn't. He was mid-story about some new therapy exercise involving emotional excavation and a blindfold. I leaned against the kitchen counter, plate in hand, chewing silently. "Why aren't you sitting, Mom?" Nolan asked. Before I could answer, Jurvitson said, "She likes to stand. She's always on the move." I smiled like that was true. My fingers tightened around the plate. Even chairs have more belonging than me. "Some women are just built to carry more," Jurvitson's mother said later, sipping her wine. "God made them that way." She said it like scripture, like praise, like I should be proud. Lenora didn't say anything. She just kept folding her napkin into a tighter and tighter triangle. I realized then, I wasn't being consulted. I was being assigned, labeled, like a suitcase someone else packed for a trip I didn't agree to take. The chipped teacup came back to me, how I'd touched it earlier, how I'd passed over it for something whole, meant to be useful, not meant to be whole. After dinner, the house buzzed with leftovers and sports recaps. I washed the dishes alone. I didn't mind doing the work. I minded that no one noticed I was always the one doing it. I found the chipped teacup on the shelf, just sitting there, not broken enough to throw away, not whole enough to use. I gripped it, thought about throwing it, just once. Then I didn't. I wrapped it in a napkin and put it back. Is silence really noble? Or just convenient? For them. I picked up my phone and opened a fresh note, titled it in all caps. January 27th. Dinner. They decided. I wasn't asked. That night, I stopped asking myself what they needed and started asking what I deserved. The next morning felt colder than it should have. Maybe it wasn't the weather. Maybe it was the way the air shifted in my chest when Jurvitson asked me to come along. "They're opening the group session," he said, holding his coffee like it had wisdom at the bottom. "Just for this week, a showcase of sorts." I didn't want to go. God knows I didn't. But he gave that half smile, the one he uses when he's already written the next scene in his head. "Just be there," he added. "You don't even have to speak." So I got dressed. No makeup, neutral sweater, flat shoes. I wanted to look forgettable. I didn't know then I was about to be a prop. As I pulled my coat on, Hadley glanced up from her cereal. "You're going too? I thought it was just for him." That one hit, not because she said it, but because it was true. I was always there, yet somehow never included. Present, but invisible. I drove the car. I packed the snacks. I sat in the room. But I was never invited to be part of the conversation. We walked into the community center just past 9. Folding chairs in a circle, a pot of herbal tea sweating on the corner table, tissues placed like decor, lamps with no bulbs lit. Everything felt dim. Even the people. Jurvetson took the floor. No hesitation. Like he'd been waiting for this. "This," he said, gesturing around, "is where I began unpacking the patterns, the pain, the projections." The group nodded. A few murmured affirmations like we were in church. Then he motioned to me. "This is Rhea," he said. "She's been my anchor during my most disconnected seasons." I smiled. Small, stiff. My eyes didn't know where to land. He cleared his throat and launched into a talk titled, "When My Pain Became Her Prison." That's when I felt it, my face locking into place, my back straightening involuntarily. Every part of me went into still mode. He told stories I recognized. But he added things, turned miscommunications into dramatic betrayals, added tears that never existed, removed context like it was clutter. "There were days," he said, eyes glazed, voice thick, "when I felt like a hostage in my own marriage. But look, she's still here. That's love." Applause. Light but sincere. One woman looked at me like I'd just survived a hurricane. I wanted to tell her I hadn't. I was still in it. I thought about speaking, just one sentence to level the field, but my mouth stayed shut. My own voice felt like a betrayal to myself, like opening it would somehow make all of this real. I never thought I'd become a silent prop in someone else's healing story. Back home, hours later, Hadley knocked gently on the bathroom door. I was brushing my teeth, pretending the taste of mint could wash away what I hadn't said. "You're gonna stay calm like you did in the group, right?" she asked. I turned slowly. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "Dad said you're not really my mom, so I shouldn't expect mom things from you." My breath paused. Not caught, just paused. I nodded. "Okay." I didn't cry. I didn't explain. I just walked out, down the hallway. Laundry waited, like it always did. I stood in the washroom, folding towels that weren't mine, listening to Jurvetson on the phone, his voice slipping through the vent. "Yeah, she came. That's all that matters. The group saw we're managing." That night, I sat in bed with my laptop open. A new folder. February. I titled the first document, "Not Mine, but Expected." I thought back to the session. Not what was said, but what wasn't. No one asked what my healing looked like. I remembered something my old therapist once told me. The person who's always steady gets overlooked the moment they wobble. I whispered it aloud. I wobbled. No one noticed. Then I opened my calendar and began copying everything. Every shared event, group chat, therapy reminder. Not for any particular plan, just instinct. I scrolled through old emails, saved a few I never thought I'd need, forwarded them to a private address I hadn't used in years, backed up texts, group schedules. I opened the kitchen drawer and found the chipped teacup again. I wrapped it in a napkin and placed it in the back. Not gone, but not out. If I couldn't be heard in a circle of healing, maybe it was time to step out of it altogether. I was folding socks when my phone buzzed. Mavis, or rather, a blog post from her, titled "Good Women Make Hard Choices," had just been shared in a local parenting group. 57 comments in under an hour. The title alone told me it was about me. She hadn't used my name, but every word under that heading cut like it was etched just for me. "Some women confuse strength with stubborn silence," it said. "Sometimes healing begins with letting him heal." They called her brave. Wise. One woman commented, "More wives need to hear this." I scrolled down and saw Mavis had replied to them all with hearts and praying hands. My eyes didn't sting, they just settled. Last week she'd texted, "I've got your back, no matter what." I opened that message, stared at it for a second, then deleted it without flinching. "Noted," I said out loud to no one. Later that evening, I drove over to Mom's. She still lived in the same house I grew up in, still kept the same AM radio playing in the kitchen, still folded linens as if doing so held her together. Her hands were moving like clockwork when I walked in. She looked up, smiled, and went right back to folding. "I brought you some lentil soup," I said. She nodded, thanked me softly, then asked if I'd eaten. I hadn't. She didn't press. I sat at the table, the wood familiar beneath my palm. I tried to start carefully. "He's using therapy," I said, "but not like it's a mirror, like it's a microphone." She didn't look up. "Your father did worse," she said, "but I stayed, for you." I didn't answer. She folded the final towel, set it on top of the stack. Sometimes staying is stronger than walking. I didn't have the energy to argue with that kind of loyalty. I thought about being 10, watching her clean those same linens after a night when Dad didn't come home. I had asked her back then why she didn't say anything. Her answer had been quiet but direct. Peace has a higher price than truth sometimes. Back then, I didn't understand it. Now, I hated how well I did. That memory stayed with me through the night. I had this one image, 3 dinner plates set at the table. My father had brought home a casserole, claiming it was from a coworker. It had a sticky note on the foil lid, said "enjoy" in handwriting that wasn't his. She served it anyway. Never said a word. Smiled through the whole meal. Afterward, I had asked her, "Why don't we say anything when it's wrong?" She just shook her head. "Because silence keeps things easier. For everyone else." I had broken my plate that night, snapped it in 2, then glued it back together after she went to bed. I think that's when I learned how to swallow everything. Now, years later, I sat at my own table, looking at the chipped teacup in my drawer. I didn't reach for it, just stared. The crack looked less like a flaw now, and more like a map. A reminder. My mother had loved me by erasing herself, and I had loved Jurvetson by copying her. That ends with me. I opened a new document in my February folder and titled it Echoes. Underneath, I wrote, "No more shared bank accounts. No more doors I don't have keys to. No more waiting for permission to speak." I thought about my wedding day, about the dress that felt too tight and the vow I choked through. My mother had held my hand before the ceremony. "Love is endurance," she'd whispered. But now I know. Endurance without reciprocity is just self-destruction dressed in lace. The phone rang. Maeve. We hadn't talked much since COVID layoffs, but she still sounded like she used to, direct, unfiltered. "You still got your mediation certification?" she asked. I hesitated. "Because my center's hiring," she added. "Part-time, quiet work." I breathed in. "Let's talk." I didn't even hang up before I opened another note. Plan B, not for escape. For reclaiming. I didn't dig out the chipped cup that night, but I didn't bury it either. I just slept with the drawer open. I didn't need a scream. I just needed a step. It was a Wednesday night, the kind where everything runs late and no one says thank you. I was rinsing out lunchboxes while the kids took turns asking for help with math problems they barely listened to me explain. The dog needed to be walked, the dishwasher hadn't been unloaded, and I was tired, down to the bone, where even blinking felt like too much effort. Nolan came into the kitchen with his backpack half open. "Teacher said we have to turn in our folders tomorrow. I forgot," he said, tugging at the zipper. I opened it for him, pulled out a handful of crumpled papers, a juice-stained spelling list, and near the bottom, a drawing. Crayons, smiling stick figures, the house, a dog. Jurvetson with his usual baseball cap. 3 kids, trees, sun, but no me. "Sweetie," I said, keeping my tone soft. "Where's Mommy?" He glanced up at me. "You weren't smiling last week. Teacher said to draw our happy family." I nodded like I understood. Like it didn't split something deep in my chest. "Okay," I said. He ran off to find his tablet. I stood there a while, staring at the drawing. It wasn't mean. It wasn't intentional. That's what made it worse. I folded it once, carefully, and slid it into my February folder under the title I had already used the night before. Erased. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A text from a parent I barely knew. "Are you okay? Saw that clip going around?" I didn't understand at first. Then I opened Facebook. There I was. 12 seconds, poorly lit, raising my voice. "Put the iPad down, now," I said, in a voice I barely recognized. My eyes were red. My hands moved too fast. The caption read, "This is what untreated bitterness looks like. Pray for the children." The video had a couple hundred views already. Comments were pouring in. "She's clearly overwhelmed. Poor kids. She needs help, not judgment. Therapy isn't enough if you still act like this." I knew immediately who filmed it, Jurvetson. It had been his phone on the counter that day. He cropped out the buildup, the shouting match between the older two, the spilled milk, the broken plate. He cut it so clean it looked like rage came out of nowhere. He didn't just steal my story. He published his version of it. I didn't cry. I saved the video, took screenshots of every comment, made a folder called Evidence. By the time dinner rolled around, I was already on autopilot. I plated 4 meals like muscle memory. Jurvetson walked in half an hour late, bottle of red in hand, grin wide like nothing had burned. "Great group today," he said. "Talked about childhood trauma and how it shapes parental presence." He poured himself a glass, sat down like a guest in his own house. "Looks like the internet's a little confused," he chuckled. "Some people just don't understand trauma responses." He looked at the kids. "We don't judge mommy, right?" One nodded. One didn't look up. The other 2 stayed quiet. I said nothing, just cleared plates as they emptied. Later that night, I sat on the edge of the tub with the video playing again. I watched myself, mouth open, eyes wide, jaw tense. Not ashamed, just studying. I wasn't embarrassed by the anger. I was embarrassed by how long I'd choked it down. I opened my calendar and started logging what I remembered. Not to track time, to track erasure. Every entry. Things I didn't say. Screaming in my head didn't count. The next day, I told Hadley she couldn't stay up late. Told Jurvetson I wouldn't be handling his therapy carpool anymore. Told the kids no for 3 things I would have said yes to last week. He looked at me across the kitchen. "You're being cold lately." "No," I said, folding a dish towel. "I'm just being visible." That night, just before bed, Nolan knocked on my door and handed me another drawing. This one had me in it. Small, off to the side. But there, underneath, in his uneven handwriting, "You were smiling today." I taped it to the mirror. Not to prove I was loved. To prove I'd shown up. I wasn't trying to be remembered anymore. I was trying not to disappear again. I was at the pharmacy counter when my debit card got declined. The cashier smiled the way people do when they're trying to make you feel like it's no big deal. I laughed quietly, told her I'd check the app. And I did. 0. Joint account drained. Notifications muted. A text from Jurvetson came in 2 minutes later. "Moved funds temporarily, for budgeting clarity." No warning, no explanation, no apology. I stood in the parking lot for a while, receipt still in my hand, not because I couldn't afford the $33, but because I couldn't afford the feeling that came with it. It wasn't about money, it was about power dressed up in spreadsheets. I drove to the school anyway, volunteered in the front office, laminated library passes, stuck smiley face stickers on behavior charts, nodded, smiled, pretended like I wasn't unraveling. Later that night, I was stirring pasta when Hadley walked into the kitchen, still holding her phone. "Dad said you're the kind of woman men settle for when they get tired of passion." I turned the heat off. "What?" I asked, but I already knew she wasn't making it up. "He said you're reliable," she added, like that made it better. I crouched down and looked her in the eyes. "Do you think that?" She hesitated. "I think you're always tired," she said. That one stuck. I gave her a hug and told her to wash her hands before dinner. She ran off. I stood up, reached for a glass, and held onto the counter when my hands started shaking. Not from rage, just realization. Jurvetson had always been poetic with strangers, raw and transparent when there was an audience. But at home, he was calculation in khakis. I set the table. 4 plates. One for a man who saw my labor but not my being. After the kids were in bed, I found a stack of papers on the dining room table. One of his printed worksheets for therapy. Triggers. My wife's emotional limitations. Bullet points. Cold during intimacy. Dismisses my need for solitude. Plays the victim when asked to grow. I didn't rip it, didn't scream, just read every word and snapped a photo. Then I slid the paper into the back of my own folder, one labeled April Prep. Every abuser I've met starts by sounding enlightened. The next morning, I called the bank. Asked to open a new account in my name only. The clerk paused when my name flagged account restrictions. Looks like your current account is under dual control settings. I kept my voice even. I'll be setting legal boundaries soon, I said. I just need a start. She processed it. I made a mental note. Access isn't freedom. It's illusion. That night, I didn't cook, didn't explain. Just heated up leftover chicken and watched TV with the kids. Nothing deep. Just cartoons. Background noise to a mind that didn't want silence anymore. After they went to bed, I scrolled back to texts from our first year married. Jurvetson used to send paragraphs, words like always, forever, never leave. At the time, I thought it was love. Now, I read them like disclaimers. Fine print at the bottom of a contract I never signed. This isn't sadness anymore, it's recognition. At 10:14 p.m., I created a new email address using my maiden name. No initials, just the full thing. The name my mother gave me before she told me to stay soft. I logged onto the website Maeve had sent and filled out the application for a mediation assistant. I texted her. Still interested. Quiet work, flexible hours. Got you, she replied. I walked to the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and wrote something on a sticky note. I'm not just tired. I'm tired of being tired. I didn't tuck that one into a folder. I stuck it right where I could see it. Some prisons have bars. Mine just had expectations. Friday started with a call I didn't expect, but somehow wasn't surprised to get. It was HR. Budget cuts, they said. My hours were being eliminated effective immediately. I said, "Thank you for letting me know." That was it. No questions, no pushback. Just a calm goodbye, like I'd been rehearsing the scene in my head long before the curtain actually fell. I hung up, folded the last of the kids' laundry, and went back to chopping onions for dinner. There was something bitter about the timing, but I couldn't taste it anymore. Numb becomes normal. Jurvetson walked in around 5, gym bag over his shoulder, still in his therapy polo shirt. He didn't ask how my day went. He didn't notice the job board tab open on my laptop. Just dropped his keys on the counter and said, "Since you've got more time now, maybe you can deep clean the garage?" I didn't respond. He didn't wait. I opened a note on my phone later that evening while stirring the stew. Typed 6 words. Roles I never applied for. The next day, my brother called while I was vacuuming. I balanced the phone between shoulder and ear, half listening until he said, "We're doing Asheville for spring break. Mom's treating." That paused me. "Oh," I said. "Should I check dates with the kids' schedule?" He hesitated. "Well, we kind of figured Jurvetson could use the break. You've always been so self-sufficient." Self-sufficient. I turned off the vacuum. That evening, Mom sent a follow-up text. "Don't take it personally. You know how men are. They need space to come back better." The irony sat in my chest like a swallowed rock. My family was rewarding my husband for surviving me. I pulled out an old album from the hall closet, photos from past trips. I was in none of them, always behind the camera, always holding someone else's things. I put the album back without looking at the last page. Later that night, I sat on the porch with tea and silence. And that's when the memory hit. I was 11. A cousin's road trip. They left without me. "She's quiet, she won't mind," someone had said. No one asked me if I did. That feeling, being convenient to forget, flooded back with clarity I hadn't felt in years. I opened my journal and wrote one line. I wasn't loud enough to be missed. That was my mistake. Then I opened my family group chat, scrolled once, and deleted it. Not out of spite, out of preservation. The next day, I got a group message from my sister. Can you grab cake for Dad's birthday? Chocolate, same place as last year. I stared at it for a full minute. Typed, sure, deleted it. Typed, busy, deleted that too. Finally, I wrote, no, I can't. 10 minutes passed. Then her reply came. That's not like you. I replied, exactly. That evening, I locked the door by 8, not for safety, for sanity. I poured a glass of water, played Nina Simone's Ain't Got No I Got Life on my speaker, and sang along under my breath. Not loud, but there. I walked into the kitchen and opened the drawer without thinking. The chipped teacup sat right where I'd left it. I held it up to the light, ran my thumb along the crack. I didn't try to fix it, didn't toss it, just placed it on the windowsill. It wasn't hidden anymore, it wasn't perfect, but it was visible. Like me. If they could pretend I wasn't needed, I could pretend they never mattered. Saturday morning started with me at the school gym, folding chairs and arranging tables for Spring Culture Day. I didn't want to be there, but showing up for your kids doesn't always look like balloons and applause. Sometimes it looks like wiping down folding tables while pretending your bones don't ache. A new teacher stopped by, thanked me for coming. You're the nanny, right? They're lucky to have you, always around. I smiled, didn't correct her. A few parents chuckled politely. One leaned in to whisper, she's the quiet type. Reliable. I nodded, added another tally to the list only I kept. The list of roles I filled that no one saw. I was background, safe, expected, replaceable. Later that night, as I stood at the sink scraping off dried spaghetti, the words played again in my head. Not nanny, not mom, just convenient. They saw me, just not as mine. The following Wednesday, I took Nolan to the pediatrician for a mild cough. The receptionist looked up after typing, then frowned. I'm sorry, but your name isn't on the insurance file anymore. I blinked. I've been listed since we enrolled. She shook her head. You'll need to follow up with your provider. Back in the car, I called the insurance company. They confirmed it. Jurvetson had removed me from the family plan. No notice, no explanation. I didn't get angry. I didn't yell. That came later. When I walked through the door that evening, he was pouring cereal into a mixing bowl like it was dinner. The kids were watching something loud on the couch. You took me off the insurance, I said, not asking. He didn't look up. It's temporary, just a budgeting thing. I stared at the back of his head. I see. He shrugged. We're still covered. No, I said. You are. He blinked once. Why are you acting like this? I'm not acting, I said. I'm adjusting. That night, after the house quieted, I opened my laptop and began saving everything. Utility bills, school records, medical files, anything with my name on it, anything with theirs. I put them into a folder titled Exit Protocol. Maeve texted me that evening. Ready? Soon, I typed. Collecting receipts. Paper cuts can bleed too. Every no I said from that point forward had weight. No to parent-teacher nights if he wouldn't show. No to cleaning up after his late-night cereal bowls. No to explaining myself to people who had already decided I was unreasonable. I updated the school forms, switched out his name with mine using my maiden one, the same one I used before I signed contracts I didn't read closely enough. I changed my email signature, recorded a new voicemail greeting, changed my emergency contact to Maeve. Not him. It didn't take long. Jurvetson noticed. Why are you acting like you're single? He asked one night, halfway into his second glass of red. I looked up from my new planner. Because I'm acting like I exist. I didn't say it with venom, just truth. In my March folder, I typed one line. I'm no longer standing in the frame to prove I belong in the photo. On Friday, my first check from the mediation center cleared. It wasn't much, but it had only my name on it. I bought a planner at the corner store and filled it with only my things. Appointments I wanted, deadlines I chose, notes to self. That evening, when Jurvetson asked if I could take care of groceries next week, I didn't offer an excuse. You'll figure it out, I said. Then I spent the evening on the floor with the kids, playing Uno, losing badly, laughing anyway, not managing them, just being there. After they went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table. The drawer beside me still held the chipped cup. I didn't open it. Not yet. But I'd stopped hiding my hands. I didn't pack a bag, but I started folding away what no longer fit me. The night before his book launch, I found a copy on the counter. Soft cover, matte finish, his name across the top like a trophy. I didn't plan to flip through it, but I did. It didn't take long. Page 173. A story I knew too well, because it was mine, word for word from my journal. He hadn't even changed the phrasing, just reshaped the context to fit his own arc. I turned to the acknowledgments, names, therapists, friends. To those who witnessed my growth. No mention of me, not once, not a breath, not the woman who stayed up editing his first drafts while nursing a sick toddler, not the one who kept the house running so he could process his inner child. I didn't cry, just highlighted the paragraph, took a screenshot, closed the book. Then I placed it next to the chipped teacup on the windowsill. By the time I arrived at the venue, the room was already full. Third row was the best I could manage, close enough to see his face, far enough not to be seen. He took the stage with ease, button-down tucked, voice steady, polished like marble. Tonight is not just about a book, he said. It's about what comes after shame, what emerges when you stop pointing fingers and start owning your patterns. The crowd loved him. He read from the preface, cried at the right sentence, laughed gently at his own past. Someone in the audience, another therapist, stood up and said, "This is real vulnerability. We need more men like you showing up like this." Behind me, someone whispered, "He must have a very supportive wife." My own therapist, sitting beside me, leaned in. "He's thriving. Maybe you should try softer." I stared straight ahead. There was a moment where I imagined standing up, leaving, and no one even noticing. But I didn't move. Then came the QA. A hand went up, small, unafraid. It was Nolan. I hadn't even seen him enter. He was supposed to be with my sister tonight. The mic was passed to him. "Why didn't you write about Mommy?" he asked. The room stilled. No one laughed. Even Jurvetson froze. Nolan continued. "She's the one who always stays when you leave." Jurvetson cleared his throat. "This book is about my personal journey, buddy. It's not a memoir." Nolan shrugged. "Well, she's why you got anywhere at all." The pause that followed was longer than any I've ever sat through. Then someone clapped. Then another. Jurvetson didn't smile this time. He didn't respond. He looked cornered. The host stepped up quickly. "Would anyone else like to share?" She turned to me, eyes hopeful, expecting a tearful thank you, maybe a hug. I stood, smoothed my jacket. "I'll keep it brief," I said. "Just a short reading." I opened a small notebook, the same one Jurvetson used to borrow lines from. I read, "Healing isn't a solo act. It doesn't happen in isolation, and it doesn't require the erasure of those who held you while you cracked. Redemption written without credit is just repackaged betrayal." A woman near the aisle gasped. I closed the notebook. "That line, by the way," I added, "was lifted from my journal. Page 62. I handed the mic back, walked down the aisle as whispers buzzed behind me. Jurvetson didn't stop me. He couldn't. I didn't stay for the book signing. I didn't shake hands. I didn't look back. By the time I got home, it was already dark. I lit a candle next to the teacup, opened my laptop, and attached the screenshots, acknowledgements page, copied paragraphs, date-stamped drafts. To my lawyer. Subject, authorship. "This isn't about revenge," I wrote. "It's about authorship. Mine." I hit send. Then I turned on the dishwasher. Quiet whirring filled the kitchen, the sound of finally washing what no one else ever bothered to. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is leave your seat empty. I hit post just before midnight. The letter had taken me 3 nights to write. It wasn't an attack, not a confession, just release. I addressed it to the woman who walked into my storm, and not once did I call her a name. Not once did I curse. This isn't a letter of mercy, I wrote. It's an announcement of boundary. I didn't expect it to travel. But by morning, it had been shared across 2 parenting groups and at least 1 local women's circle. My name wasn't attached. But people knew. The way people always know when something is close enough to gossip about. Half the comments were praise. Graceful. Brave. Exactly what I needed today. The other half, not so kind. Too soft. She still wants attention. Forgiveness without consequences is permission. I closed the app. I hadn't posted it for them. I'd posted it to stop whispering in my own head. 2 days later, I sat across from my therapist again. Same beige office, same ticking clock. "Do you feel lighter?" she asked. "No," I said. "Just clearer." She nodded like that was enough. We talked about grief. Not the kind people send flowers for. The kind that happens when you bury a version of yourself, shovel by shovel, until you can't remember who she was. I wasn't trying to hurt him, I said. I was trying to stop hurting myself. Closure is private, she reminded me. You don't need their consensus. I wrote that down, taped it inside my new journal. Right next to a quote from Nina Simone. My apartment is small, clean, quiet, no shared couch, no half-used shampoo bottles, no furniture with memory soaked into the wood grain. The kids visit on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We don't talk about him. I don't ask what they say when they go back. I don't force connection. I just make space for it. One Thursday, Nolan came in holding a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me like it was something delicate. It was a drawing. Stick figures. A house. A son. All 5 of us. But this time, me in the middle, he pointed to the figure in pink. That's you. I messed up the arms, but it's you. I taped it to the fridge beside my grocery list. For the first time in years, I'd written down only what I wanted, not what they needed. Bread, blackberries, tea bags, candles. I made a cup of tea that night in a plain white mug. The chipped one still sits on the bookshelf, not hidden, not thrown out, just watched. That weekend, Jurvetson sent a text. You won the narrative. Was it worth it? I didn't reply. Later, my sister sent a long message. Words like family, confused, split, and hurt tossed around like confetti. I responded. I never asked anyone to pick sides. I just stopped picking up the weight. On Monday, Maeve called from the center. You still want the lead role? She asked. Yes, I said. No hesitation. You sound different. I am. No celebration. No fireworks. Just a quiet kind of forward. My voice doesn't crack anymore when I use it. That evening, I took a walk to the park, notebook in hand. The same bench I used to sit at when I felt like I couldn't breathe in my own house. I wrote a single sentence. I was not hard to love. I was just too quiet to be heard by loud people. I folded it, carried it home. When I walked in, the dishwasher was humming. A scent of tea still hung in the air. I placed the folded note inside the chipped teacup, not to bury it, not to glorify it, just to remember. Some wounds don't want closure. They just want to stop bleeding.